welcome back to the American University in Cairo's video game workshop series, hosted by the Computer Science and Engineering Association, uh, and by Karim Abdul Hamid, which is me, and Don Omar Al Bahedi, every Monday from 5 to 7 in the Computer Science Labs. If you want, you can sign up for sessions on our site, if you're in Cairo, of course. Or you could just watch this series. We'll be putting information online so anyone can follow. So last time we talked about blueprint, and now we're going to get into level design. So let's go over what level design is again. It's essentially the creation of environments that you're going to be in video games. So whatever rooms you're in, all of the nature around you, things like that, that's all level design. And some important components of it are lighting, architecture, gameplay. All these tiny design concepts are put into it. So I'm not going to go into blueprint. If you want more information about that, you can check out our last video. But essentially it's the basic visual scripting language for Unreal. It allows artists and people with not much time to program. Let's get into level design right away. Now, the first step of level design is basically planning. Planning is a severely underestimated step where you basically block everything out. So the very first part of planning is thinking out the concept of the level. What is the level about? What is the reason that it exists? Contrary to popular belief, just adding levels for the sake of adding levels doesn't really help. It's a bad idea, and it makes your game bloated. It's much better to have quality over quantity, and it's going to waste money. So moving past that, you have to think of a really good concept for your level. Whether it's horror or whatever, you have to think of the details of why it actually exists. What's its effect on the player? So then you have to start blocking out the actual starting area and targets. Okay, so like where the player starts, where his goal is, things like that. We're gonna be talking about this later again. Then you block out the areas connecting these places, as well as any alcoves and stuff like that that might add to the game, either in gameplay or just for aesthetic reasons. Then you plan the gameplay. How are these enemies going to deal with each other? If there are enemies. How is the puzzle going to work? Things like that. After that, you place the very basic architecture using primitives like boxes and things like that. And you place flat textures that basically allow you to see where you're going. You don't need detailed textures for now. After that, you actually build the level. You build what you're going to see. What came before is more of an architect's job. This is a construction job. So after you block everything out, you replace the brushes, the blocks, with static meshes. Like you can see here, there's a door and walls and all of this stuff. These are all meshes. They don't move, so they're static. Before, this probably used to just be one big wall and one hole in the wall. Not very pretty to look at, and definitely not good for giving a kind of tone to the player. After that, you begin to place lights and play with the intensity so that you can get exactly the mood that you want. We're going to go into that later as well. Then any skeletal or animated meshes, particle systems, entities, enemies, things like that, you place them all into your scene. And you add sound sources and various bits of ambient entities. So things that aren't essential to the gameplay but help with the vibe that you get. Now I'm going to go into the theory of level design. This is just the table of contents. But when you look at this frame, this slide, the first thing that you probably notice is this white area right over here. Now, why do you notice that? It's because it's totally different from the rest of the level. It separates itself. It tells you where you want to go just by looking at the picture. That's why level design theory is important. So first off is color theory. Color theory consists of colors, luminosity, and the difference in colors that gets you the mood that you want to set. So there are many ways that color can be brought into the scene. Okay, you can use things like color grading, which is manipulating the colors of an image to set a certain mood. Lighting, architecture, which is the actual painting of the walls and stuff like that. Particles, entities, props, enemies, everything. There are a lot of ways to bring colors into the scene. Now, the colors and the intensity that you use should reflect the feeling in gameplay. Like, you can't have a bright and vibrant environment in a horror game unless you're actually going for that, which would make sense. You might want a realistic horror game, one that could actually happen. I'm calling it though, you can't take that idea. Anyway, so lighter shades of red, for example, give you a sense of warmth. Like when you go into a nice hotel, a lot of times they use bright red and things like that to try and make you feel at home. Okay, brighter and darker shades of red they basically give intensity. It's aggression, it's love, passion. So if you're in a firefight or something like that, it's very good for that. For example, in games like League of Legends and even in games like Team Fortress 2, you have the red team and the blue team. Okay. Now the red team is usually better in games that are all about aggression because they see themselves as a more aggressive team because of their colors. Now if you go into blue, for strategy games, blue is brilliant because it promotes not only a sterile feeling like you would get in a lab, but it's used to promote thinking. So anything like a strategy game and things like that, blue players often perform better there. Green, it promotes the feeling of healthy and stuff like that. It's more natural. Orange is fun, it's adrenaline, it's excitement. Okay. Now it's not just about the colors, it's how they're also used together. Okay. For example, a lot of contrast will give something vibrant. It's going to be more happy usually, but it also helps dissociate things. Like if you have black and white or blue and orange, for example, those can help give you a very stark contrast, so you can dissociate them better. Okay. But back to the fun feeling, you wouldn't find something like that in Call of Duty. That's why the colors are all grayed out, because it has less of a contrast. Okay. Triad, which you can see over here, this triangle, gives the same sort of idea. It gives contrast and vibrancy. Analogous colors, as you can see here, blend in together. They look nice. Like you can see them in the sky and then the grass. It blends in together well. Split complementary. Well, basically, it's a blend between the two. You can see analogous colors, but then you can see also a contrast. There are other types of combinations, like square and rectangle and things like that. But those often are more complicated to think about. It's usually easier to deal with fewer colors, obviously. Also, the less contrast you have, the better they blend in together. Like here, you don't have much contrast, so they blend in well. But color isn't the only thing. Lighting is also really important for scenes. Like if you can see this really blurry image over here, but you can see this light as you could in the previous image. It helps guide the player, okay? So certain colors of light also get the player to go in a certain direction. Not only that, they also provide functional meaning. Like for example, if you see a lot of red lights, that means that there's an emergency. If you see blue lights, it's like guiding you to a certain area. Also, the size of these lights also have a similar purpose. And attenuation, which is the fall off of lights, is extremely important, because if you have attenuation that's almost linear, constant, that's the same everywhere, it's not good for a horror environment. It's very bland. It's like it doesn't promote the isolation that you're looking for. But attenuation also it deals with colors bouncing as well. Okay, so certain lights have a certain attenuation value to them, especially point lights. Colors, as I said, can help set the atmosphere, and if you use multiple colors, as you have in the scene, it's a lot more interesting. Like if you look at places that's entirely lit by one color, sometimes it could look more coherent, but most of the time it just looks bland. Contrast is basically a central theme between not only visual, but all components of a game. Like, for example, if you look at this scene to your right from Half-Life 2, one of the first things that you can see is this huge citadel in the middle of the map, okay? And what that does, when set apart by all of these puny buildings in comparison, it basically sets the importance of it through the difference in size, okay? There are also differences in color, which not only guide the player. So, for example, red means go away, or that there's been a problem. Usually yellow means come here. And there's also differences in gameplay, for example. Like when you're going from one really quiet room where nothing has happened into like a big boss fight. Pacing, which is the contrast in moments of a game, is vital to how it feels. Like if you had all action all the time, that would be a very poorly directed game. And also architecture. So for example, if you have lines going up a building, that might show you the height of it, how important the verticality of it is. But also the architecture might guide you to the horizon, towards where you need to go. It also shows status, like here you can see how well off these people might be, and theme. So when you see all of this combined architecture, it seems very technologically advanced. But contrast isn't the only important thing. There's also populating rooms. When you're designing a room, you have to design with purpose, okay? You can't just put anything for the heck of it. Like I had a friend that was, he just said he wants a room that was scientific. He didn't say anything beyond that. And when you do that, it just seems so unrealistic. So when you're designing, try and design with purpose. Like for example here, this is a picture from Black Mesa Source. Yes, if you haven't guessed already, Half-Life is my favorite game. But anyway, this is supposed to be an airlock. So when you go through here, it's supposed to ventilate the area, which is why these huge fans are in here. There's also supposed to be a security room, so that they can actually see who you are and make sure that you're fit to enter. So that's what designing with purpose is. But it's not only that, it's also the lighting and all of that. Now, when you're designing, you also have to consider the history of the room. When you go in, you should have a sense about what happened, what went down, okay? Half-Life also was very good at this as well. There is this scene where you're going to fight a big tentacle monster, and along the way you see a scientist and he's badly injured, and you can get what happened without actually being told anything. Secondly, or thirdly, you need to be able to cluster objects in a logical way. So in a warehouse, for example, you're going to have a lot of clustering, but you also have to balance that with white space. So if you can see here on the floor, there's a lot of white space. Besides that one panel that's clear and the shadows, it's pretty bare. But that gives rest to your eyes and also makes the space seem much larger. You also have to break up the rooms logically, so you can't have like a cafeteria right inside a laboratory. That wouldn't make much sense. And you also have to link everything thematically. Like having some garbage in the middle of the science lab wouldn't make much sense. Here you can see some of the great level design of Black Mesa. This is obviously a transportation room. But it's not just the railing, it's not just the tram. You can also see a tram timetable, which is an excellent detail that breaks up this empty space, which is there for white space, so that you can rest your eyes. Above you can see walkways, so you understand that this is a very busy place. There are walkways actually all around. The railing tells you that safety is important here. It's well lit, which means that it's an important industrial facility. It doesn't cheap out on the lights, basically. You can see that everything basically is high quality. These few bits of garbage, they're for contrast. They're to make it more natural. They're to show the fact that work happens here and stuff happens. Not everything in real life is perfect, and you'll find garbage almost everywhere. Here's another great example. Dishonored 2, which is the sequel to Dishonored 1, is a fantastic game that everyone should try. It was announced by Bethesda this year. But anyway, I'm not here for product placement or anything. So let me just show you why I want to show you this video. Now, the very first thing that you can see after this mask and the water is going to be this village in the middle of a mountain. Now, immediately you can see a lot of contrast here. Okay, you can see contrast in color, and while it's a little bit dyed down, the color, but that's just so it seems more coherent. If it was lots of different colors, it might be overwhelming. So contrast is great, but in small amounts. You can also see how the nature coexists with the city, which is important for storytelling. You can see the verticality of the scene. You can see the sky and the ocean matching with the actual scenery, which gives a powerful image. As you move on, though, this isn't the only example. You can also see the verticality in most scenes of this trailer, which gives a sense of the height. If you've played Dishonored before, you can know how important the height gameplay is. Here you also see a difference in kind. Okay, you can see these guards putting up the protesters probably to the wall to make sure that they receive their punishment. And it shows the difference in status between the two different groups. Also, you can see here that there's a lot of white space, but it's also broken up by these columns. As you move on, you can see a lot of garbage in the middle of the street, which makes sense. It's a street. It's not going to be clean all the time. Also, you can see how well all of the scenery is placed. It blends in with its environment very well. And you can also see here, there wouldn't logically be a bridge there, but it's connected anyways. Anyway, moving on. You should also know that it's important to design the gameplay well. Gameplay isn't something that comes naturally. It's one of the things that needs to be play-tested most, and it has to come in one of the most early steps. Here you can see a Counter-Strike map, Counter-Strike Global Offensive actually. And you can see how how well the map is designed. Here you can see the counter-terrorist spawn point and the terrorist spawn point, as well as the two bomb locations. Now, it's not all action in this map, because, as I said before, that would be boring. You need to have a contrast in gameplay. So in the beginning, they get to buy and then move through their hallways, but then immediately they have several choke points. Choke points are areas where a lot of combat will be found. Okay. On the right, you can see a place where the counter-terrorists can snipe very easily. Now, it's also broken up by cover. Cover allows you to have more strategic gameplay, so it's not all just run and gun. Okay, but long corridors are, in contrast to that, really good for gunning down enemies. So you can see how easily you can gun down your enemies, but also how easily they can find cover. So it is a battle of player skill. For multiplayer, you have to be sure that your enemies converge at the same place at the same time. That's why the bomb points are in the middle. Actually, it's a little bit closer to the counter-terrorist zone, so they can reach it there earlier. Timing is really important in this case. In addition to that, not in Counter-Strike, but in other games, like, for example, older games like Half-Life, has pickups. So you don't want to place the best pickups in the beginning so people can automatically get the rocket launcher and kill everyone. Anyway, now that I've explained the basic concepts of how to actually design your map, let's go ahead and create ours. Now, before you start, you usually want to come up with your own concept map and all of that. But I'm just going to try and block something down. Okay? So let's try and remove all of the walls here by pressing on each one and deleting them individually. Now that I've done that, these two. Now that I've done that, let's actually start to block out our level. Now, let's pull this out and go to actually BSP. BSP is binary space partition, and it's basically basic brushes, basic stuff that you can put into your map. So let's just drag out a box and put it wherever we want. Okay. A bit lower towards the middle. Actually, no, that's good. Okay. Now we can resize our blocks. So let's make it. Oh, it's a bit too high. Let's make it 4x4 by 1. Okay. Actually, let's increase that to 16 by 16 by 1. Just so we have a big enough area to mess with. And just put that in the middle, so we have a ground to work on. Okay. Now if you press play, you should be able to walk around on a new piece of ground. Now let's continue blocking out our levels. So let's go, sorry, not in there. Let's just start to put in some, for example, houses. So I'm going to put a block here and just copy paste. Put another one over here. It doesn't have to be very accurate. With the more level design you do, the further into a level you get, the better you design. The more detailed you design, I mean. But these are just supposed to be some example houses. They don't have to be very accurate. So let's put in some lights to make things interesting. So I go into the lights tab, pull out a light, and just drag it wherever I want. So let's put it over here. And it's a bit white, okay? White is very bland. So let's try and click, you click on light color over in this properties panel and just get whatever color you want. Let's make it yellow. I know that's kind of boring, but it's more realistic. You see a lot of yellow lights in real life. Press OK whenever you're ready. And you can deal with the attenuation radius, which is how it falls off. But for now, let's just bump up the intensity a bit. Place a few more by copy pasting and dragging them wherever we want. There we go. Now we have some nice lighting. If you're wondering why there are X's here, I believe it's because we have too many lights. But anyway, now that we have, let's consider this a very basic level. That we can press play and we can run around, bump into everything. Whatever, this might be a hallway or a bunch of houses if you make the character smaller. But let's go ahead and start actually building up our level. Now, now that we've designed it and considered that we want the player to go from here to here, we might have added enemies if we had any. But let's go into architecture. So there's going to be content, starter content, and then architecture. And then start actually placing the parts of the details that we want to add. Okay, so let's delete this, just so we can put in our own building. Actually, we don't have much space here, so let's try delete this as well. We'll add it back later. And then now we can start to place bits of our houses. We just drag and drop, literally. That's it. That's all we need to do. That's too big though. So you add the parts of the house that you want, and then you begin to rotate it. You can find the three main transform options, which is translate, which is moving, rotate, and scale, which are obvious. And then you rotate it however you want. By default, it snaps to 10 degrees. So you can accurately place it at 90 degrees so that it's a straight wall. Also consider the fact that while square houses aren't really nice to look at, it is pretty basic. It's one of the most basic things you can do. So let's continue to align these so that you have a nice, really basic house. And if you're wondering why there's preview written everywhere, that's just the settings that we have ready now. We can change that whenever we want. So let's add a floor to for the roof. And if you're wondering why you're having these little glitches, that's because some of the faces are fighting with each other to have priority. They're in the same location. So when you're trying to build a level, usually you would place it in such a way that you wouldn't see these seams, but usually you're going to face them no matter what you do. So now we have a really ugly basic house. Keep in mind that if you're actually at AUC, we're going to try and start giving you some better content as soon as we can. You can add some shapes for whatever reason you want. But we're actually going to go into materials. If you were there for the last video, a material is basically just the parameters and textures of a surface. So let's take this BSP and let's try and add a cobblestone finish to it. So we can see here the surface materials. So we're just going to grab the cobblestone and drag it right on. It's even highlighted so you can see it. So once we do that, you can see it has this cobblestone surface. Unfortunately, it's not tiled very well, and the tiling isn't available here. But whatever, it suits our purposes. So let me just put that back in. And now we want to give the house actual details, actual texturing. So let's add a floor. So let's go back into architecture. And just so you know, going in and out of menus is one of the only constants in life, or at least in Unreal. Then we go back into materials and just drag whatever we want onto it. That's another way. You don't have to always drag it over here. You can drag it right on. So we can just play around and figure out what we want to add. Now let's move on to the walls. Let's actually delete the back wall. Go back into architecture and add a window. So just to brighten up this area. Once you've placed that properly, you have a window in your house. Now let's go back into materials, and let's say we put concrete tiles. It's a postmodern look. Or no, that doesn't really look nice, but whatever suits our purposes. We'll actually be teaching how to create our own surfaces in the future. So you'll only have to deal with these really rudimentary surfaces for now. They look nice, but they don't work really logically. So if we go back into starter content and then into blueprints, you can see that there are some already available. I'm doing this to show you how essential blueprints are, how better they make the map. So basically, here is a lamp already made, and it already adds a lot of details that would otherwise take a while to create. So you already have a lamp in there. Okay, and you can see how it actually has the edge of the lamp considered into it. You can also add things like wall sconces, if you can in fact place it properly. Actually, it would be better on this wall. Just doing this because I'm kind of lazy, to be honest. But it looks nice, right? Anyway, in addition to that, you can even add things like particle effects. Like here, this is smoke, so the house is on fire for some reason. Remember that you're gonna end up scaling and relocating everything, and try and remember to be as accurate as you can, because all of these holes in walls, that's really like 1990s or early 2000s work. We've moved past that. We're into quality, okay? So try and be as exact as you can, but not to the point where it seems unnatural. Anyway, now that we've created a basic level, you can continue as far as you want and create whatever kinds of levels you want. Remember that we're going to continually be creating assets that will be available on our website, hopefully, and that you can access and download and play with. Anyways, I hope to see you on Monday. Every Monday from 5 to 7. See you soon, guys.